All right, we're live. GA everybody. Welcome to what's going to be another great DevNTell. So if you didn't know, DevNTell is a 30-minute window for builders to showcase something they're passionate about or been working on in Web3. It's going to be an awesome project we've been working on, demonstrating and testing best practices, automation goodies, smart contracts, how to structure a project, etc. Basically, if you got a passion for something, this is your opportunity to share with the community. And today I'm excited to have Russell from the dAppling network on to show us how we can host decentralized front ends with dAppling. Welcome, Russell. Happy to have you on.
Happy to be on. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Perhaps before we start into the meat of the presentation, you want to give a brief introduction about yourself to the crowd, how you got into Web3, a bit about background.
Sure. Yeah, sounds good. So for me, on my background, I've been a developer for a while. I worked at a couple of large tech companies in the past. I worked as a software engineer at Capital One. I was a staff engineer at Wayfair. And I previously co-founded a startup in the Web2 space called Deep Hire. And we were working on one-way video interviews for candidates. So they could essentially, when applying for a job, they could upload a video resume. And I got into the crypto space about 2 years ago or so, essentially read through the Ethereum white paper and the value of like smart contracts and what you could build like with smart contracts was really, really exciting. And essentially immediately became obsessed and just spending all my free time learning as much as I could in the space, learning like the dev stack, how to build things and creating things in the Web3 space. And then for the last year and a half or so, I was working at Arbor Finance, and I'm going to our landing page. If you can see my screen, going to the landing page here too. But I was working on Arbor Finance, which was a DeFi app that allowed DAOs and on-chain entities to raise debt-based financing. And we had a couple successful issuances there. We had one where with Ribbon Finance, where they raised 3 million USDC. And we also had one with Ichi and with Shapeshift. And then about 3 months ago or so, started working on dAppling, which is a tool for hosting decentralized front ends in a really simple way with good performance. And I'll dive into that a bit more shortly, but that's high level about me. Oh, and I guess last thing, so dAppling team, we are currently a team of 4, me and my co-founder, Kyle. And then we also have Grace and Danny, who are both founding engineers and helping us to build this product.
Wow, that's quite the distinguished background, and yeah, really happy to and excited to have you on to share all the goodies you have with dAppling. So I guess what can viewers expect from watching your content today? What can
Yeah,
they leave with?
good question. So starting out, I want to give a quick overview of kind of like what we're building and why, and then do a demo of the platform. So basically show you have a front end on GitHub now, you're hosting it like Vercel, Netlify, your own stack, essentially like how you can go through and deploy that on IPFS in about like two or 3 minutes with dAppling. So I want to do a quick overview of that. And then after that, I would love to dive more into the technical side on how things actually work. And if there's any specific sections there that the audience is interested in, would love to keep it like audience driven on what pieces we walk into. And let me actually share in the chat. So I'll send this. Let me know a number if you can see this. Oh no, I lost my formatting when I paste in the chat. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 there. Would love if there's any of these in particular that you would like me to prioritize when I'm walking through, like on the more technical side on like how any of these pieces work. But if there's any questions during the presentation as well, please send them in the chat. Would be more than happy to answer and elaborate on anything there.
Awesome. Yeah, looks like we're in store for a jam-packed session. Let's get right into it.
Nice. Yeah, sounds good. So yeah, kicking it off. So we're building dAppling. Essentially, what dAppling is it's a developer tool that's targeted at Web3 developers and makes it extremely easy to host your front-end site on decentralized infrastructure. We're prioritizing a couple different things. Number one is developer experience and how easy it is, or making it extremely easy to actually deploy on decentralized infrastructure. And then we're focused on the performance and security side as well. So out of the box, how can this be as performant as possible for your users? And then also, like on the security side, how can you prevent common like Web3 security attacks, like DNS hijacking, or like phishing attacks, and how can you help to prevent those? So that's essentially at a high level, like what we're building and what we're focusing on. And yeah, I think next steps, I'll just jump through. I'll show you an example of what it actually looks like to deploy a site, and then I can elaborate some more on some of the other features. All right. So I guess starting out, first step is just connecting your GitHub account, which I have done already here. And step two is clicking New Project. Then from here, you just can select whichever project you would like to deploy. I'm going to choose this one, No More Acronyms. After you choose this, we do some automatic framework detection. So we look at whatever your front-end site is using, and we're able to tell if it's using like Next.js, Create React App, Vite, etc. And we'll auto-detect this. But if you have custom build commands here for actually building your project, you can fill this out as well. But most of the time, you can get to this page, kind of ignore everything here, unless you have a custom config, and then click Next. And then here on this part, we just do some checks to see if there'd be any issues for actually deploying your site to IPFS. Because with like Create React App, for example, there's a change you need to make to your package.json file for it to like actually deploy to IPFS. And we'll give a warning here if we detect anything that will stop it from being able to be deployed on IPFS well. All right, cool. So click deploy. Now this kicked off our job on our side to actually build the site, and we'll be deploying it on IPFS on the background. I can show you this when it completes in a couple of minutes, but just for saving time, I can jump straight into one that has already completed that I built already. So here's our blog, like a fork of our blog site. And here you can see the GitHub repo for this. I went through the same flow for this that I just showed you, but you can see here, this site has already deployed. And when this deploys, you get a unique production URL for the site. So anytime you update the site, you merge back into main, then this URL will update with the newest version of your site. You also have the ability here to add your own custom domain. So you can set up whatever you want here, then point your DNS records at us, and you can bring your own domain name. And just yesterday, we added ENS support as well. So you can see here for this project, I actually connected my ENS name, booklyn.eth. So if I open this up, this is pointing at this blog site that I deployed here with dAppling. And this gets automatically updated in the same way. Any merges into main on this repo will update the content that is on booklyn.eth.limo. And in a bit, would be happy to dive more into like how that actually works on a technical level. But yeah, before I get to that, what else is there? Here on the deployments, we have something called preview builds. And here on the test dAppling blog site, I made a change earlier today. But if I actually make a PR for this change, it will kick off a process here. You can see it just started, where we look at each of these commits on a PR, and we create a preview deployment URL for each of these commits, which makes it really easy if you're working on a team on your project, you make some front-end changes, we create a URL that whoever's reviewing your PR can just click on, and they can see what the site would actually look like after those changes. And then here you can see, looking on this front-end piece, you can, actually, let me look at this. So I accidentally created this against another repo in this example here. This is not the one I was showing you. I meant to make it against our test app, but I made it against our production app instead, which is a different project. So let me actually go ahead and pull that back up. Let me go here. Let me go to our repo. So I'll make another change here. I'll go ahead and just edit the README, nice and simple. I'll just add a space, commit this change, a new branch. We'll call it Russell patch 2. What the heck? Here, I want to merge this into main here. That looks good. And I will create this pull request. Okay, so that's what I meant to do earlier. You can see now this kicked off a preview build here on this project. If we go back to the dAppling site, we can see that this kicked off a preview build. And you can see here it's off of branch Russell patch 2, and then this is my commit message, update README. And if we actually merge this into main, now to go ahead and it'll automatically update our production URL and our production builds. So you can see here, this is like building a production deployment. If you like look into these deployments as well, there's a couple things you can see. You can see the build logs. So if the build fails for whatever reason, or you want to see the status, be able to expand on that and look here. If we go to a completed build, so if I go back here and I look at the currently deployed production build, you can see the IPFS CID for this deployment, because we're also deploying everything to IPFS. So like how this works is for like this domain that we have right now, the way that we think about this is it's the centralized deployment of the site. And then we also want to provide additional access points that you can use to access your site. And using the IPFS CID is an example of one of the alternative entry points. And you can imagine this is useful where, for whatever reason, or like the reason we have the centralized deployment piece right now is to help ensure like speed and resiliency for the users, where we found it's extremely important for most apps for the site to load 100% of the time and really fast for users. But then we wanted a version of the site to also always be available through IPFS if there's issues with the centralized deployment, if there's censorship, et cetera. Like if there's a time-sensitive operation that people need to make in a DeFi app, then it's a pretty bad situation as a user if you can't like access if there's an outage of one of the services and you can't access the centralized deployment for whatever reason. So there's always this fallback on another way that you can access the front ends for the apps. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it for an overview. Oh, I guess last thing we just added is we added an analytics package. So this is a package on GitHub that you're able to just install and wrap your app in. And then we'll also track any page views and unique users that actually visit that site. And that happens automatically after installing the package. So cool. If anyone has, I think I'm going to pause here on the demo piece, look at the comments for priority for what to go through next, and happy to dive into kind of the technical details now of how the different pieces are implemented. Okay.
Yeah, again, if anybody has questions, please post them in the comments and we'll bring them up here. I guess before we get into the technical side of it, is there any particular reason you chose IPFS over some other storage protocol?
Yeah, so we looked into the different storage protocols, and IPFS was what we found was like made the most sense starting out from like the performance aspect of loading the content quickly. We are considering adding support for some other storage protocols in the future, like Arweave is one example. We're also going to look into what it would look like to integrate with Filecoin, but IPFS seemed like the natural first place to start with. And yeah, that's essentially it at a high level.
Awesome. Yeah, makes sense. And the UI looks really slick, by the way.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Good
Nice.
stuff. Yeah.
Sweet.
All
All
right.
right, cool.
We can keep going, and then if there's
Cool.
any questions, I'll let you know.
Nice. All right, sweet.
Oh,
So it looks like,
we do have one. We do have one. Pop up now. You said there were some problems with React and IPFS. What were those?
oh, nice. So there's a couple different things. So we cover this in more detail if you actually go to our blog page. I think here in this article, we dive deep into this. There's another article that talks about this as well, but there's some issues with like pathing and how paths work with IPFS that's different. For example, if you're using Create React App and you're using Page Router, you actually have to use Hash Router instead for the routing to work correctly. And there's some other weird edge cases around that. But the biggest thing, I guess there's two things that we've seen were the most common. Number one was having a specific configuration set in your package.json file if you're creating a Create React app. You need to have, what is it? I'm forgetting I'm actually forgetting what the field is called. But for Next.js apps, there's an option called trailing slash that needs to be set true for the routing to work correctly when you deploy it on IPFS. And how we're handling that right now is we actually inject those commands into the package.json file if they're not there. So like if you go through this flow to do an app, as part of our like build process, we look at the package.json file and we look at the next config file. And if that trailing slash value is missing, or if the other one is missing for Create React app, then we inject them automatically. And that's to help with the experience where someone wants to deploy their site, then they deploy it. It looks like it is deployed successfully, but the routing's broken. That's a pretty bad situation to be in. So we're focused very heavily on how can we make this work out of the box on the first time for someone who's trying to deploy their site. So we try and like abstract that away. But then there are some things in particular you need to be aware of when building a site for IPFS. The biggest one being how the routing works. For Next.js apps, this will, like with their routing, it'll work out of the box with our platform. But if you're using like React Router, then there's some specific things that you need to do.
Awesome. Yeah. Great response.
Cool. Nice. All right. So I see now there was some prioritization for that list that I sent earlier on diving deeper into how like the different tech pieces worked. It looks like the first one is how ENS/IPNS works. So I'll walk through that. So how this works at a high level is for each project that is created, we create an IPNS key for that project. And IPNS, it allows us to point to any IPFS CID. And I guess like how this works on the technical level is a user comes in here, they click to add their ENS name. I'm going to just pick a random one. Let's put booklyn2.eth. I guess it doesn't exist, so there's an error. Let's see if someone has book.eth. Okay, nice. So book.eth, this actually isn't going to work because the transaction will fail because I don't own this domain. But essentially, something pops up here. You connect your wallet, and then you click a button to set the CID. this will create a transaction for you on the ENS smart contract to set a specific field on your ENS name. And I'll show you what it looks like for mine. So if we look at my ENS name, bookland.eth, you can see here, this content hash field, it got set to this IPNS name. And you can see here, this matches up with this IPNS key here. And now what happens is if you use a service like Bookland or like .limo, what their service does is they look at the subdomain. So they look at bookland.eth. Then they look at the ENS record for bookland.eth. They look at this content hash field. They see that it's an IPNS name. They do a lookup to get the IPFS CID that this IPNS name is pointing at. And then they serve that content at that IPFS CID. And the reason that we decided to set an IPNS record here, instead of this could also be an IPFS record, is so we could do gasless updates. So essentially, a user in our platform, you have to pay gas when you set this IPNS record in your ENS name here. But then anytime the site updates, we also update where this IPNS key points to. So here, like for this production deployment, it was pointing at this CID, but then we did this new production deployment, and now it's automatically pointing at this new CID. And that's essentially how it works. At a high level, we are using a service called W3 name for this. And that's a service by Web3 Storage. And it helps us with the republishing. That's why we decided to use this service. There was also another service that was pretty cool called, what are they called? dwebservices.xyz. And we were considering using this service, but decided not to because how their service works. It would have been easier to integrate with this service, but they have custody over the private keys that are used for updating the IPNS records. And we wanted to have custody of those on our platform to make sure that the IPNS names are always available and could always be updated. So we decided to use we also considered running the infrastructure for IPNS ourselves, but it made more sense for where we are right now to use the W3 name service for the republishing for the IPNS names. We are the only ones that have custody over those private keys and are storing them securely. And in the future, maybe we add some additional IPNS infrastructure around it, but W3 name works pretty well right now for our use case. And I'm also in a process of writing a blog post about this. So I guess if you check back to blog.dAppling.network in about a week, probably early next week, there will be an article going more in depth on what we learned about actually adding IPNS here. And honestly, the IPNS piece was honestly a bit more complex than I expected it to be. But now it's live. We just launched this ENS feature this morning, so would love if anyone wants to try it out and give it a try. It'd be much appreciated. We have like a chat in our app as well. If you have any like feedback, our team's there and be happy to answer any questions. Yeah, I'm going to pause there for a second, see if there's any more questions. I see we have about 5 minutes total. I don't know if you said, Narb, there's usually like a 10-minute Q&A at the end. So I'd love to maybe see if there's any Q&A. If there's not any Q&A, would love to maybe talk about one more section and how it works from the technical side.
Yeah, for sure. Like I mentioned, gang, if you have any questions, please drop them up in the comments. People are asking for your Twitter link. I will drop that in the comments there. But in the meantime, I think you can go ahead with the last section you want to go over, and I'll let you know if there's questions.
Nice. Sounds good. So I guess number 2, how analytics works. So it's actually pretty simple. So if you don't have this set up on an app already, let me go to one that I don't have it set up. let's go to this one. So if you visit this page, here it opens up our docs, or opens up the GitHub site. That has like a quick start here for adding it. But essentially we have this npm package. And as a developer, you would just install this npm package, import this analytics component, and then like wrap your app in this analytics component. And all this analytics component does is anytime there's a page navigation or like a new page view, it makes an API request to our backend server, which essentially just logs that request. And it logs three things right now. It logs, number one, the user, that there was a page visit and the URL. Number two, actually, can you give me a second? Okay, sorry, I'm back. We do three different things. One is the site that was visited. Number two is just the like where the user came from. So if they came from like Twitter or somewhere else, we log that. And then we also, like for each analytic event, we generate just a random UID for that user and use that to track just unique users. But then we're not tracking any additional information, no like private information about any users or anything. It's just pretty simple there. And then on the backend side, we just have a database that's keeping track of those analytic events. And then from our front end on the analytics page, we're just querying that and showing it in a nice way for the user, all that analytics data. And yeah, we have about 3 minutes left, so probably not too much time to jump into any other section, but happy to like dive into anything else more in depth. Like if anyone wants to reach out to me on Twitter, my DMs are open, so happy to chat about anything. I guess for some of the things that we're adding now for dAppling, one thing that we are lacking that we are very excited to add sometime in the future is support for serverless functions. And we're still figuring out on how to do this. We want to use decentralized compute in some way, like Akash Network or some of the other people working on decentralized compute. That's another thing that we really want to add. And yeah, I guess I'll pause there and see if there's any final questions.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of how to get started, is there like a pricing tier, or is it completely free for folks to sign up at this point?
Yeah, great question. So right now we do have, and you can see dAppling.network at the bottom of this page. So it's going to be free for a majority of use cases. Like if you have a hackathon project or a portfolio site, then your usage requirements are going to be low, that you'll be fine on the Grow plan, which is free and will be free forever. Sometime in the future, we are going to have this Bloom plan around, and it's mostly going to be centered around team features. So yeah, for most use cases, free plan will be perfect and will be fine. But then we also have the Bloom plan if you're like working on a DeFi project with a team or working on something more serious. And that piece is paid above a certain traffic level. Yeah. Sorry if there's any covered. Yeah, but that's it on the cost side.
And then for the ENS updates, are users expected to pay the gas on their behalf, or do you cover those costs?
Good question. So it costs money to set the IPNS record on the ENS name for the first time, but any updates afterwards is gasless and free. So there's like a one-time cost to basically whatever cost it is to set that content hash field on your ENS record. But after that, no more costs.
Beauty. And yeah, that unfortunately brings us to time. But gang, if you have any further questions for Russell, I have dropped his Twitter handle in the comments, but it should also be in the YouTube description, as well as the blog post that I'll be sharing out later today or tomorrow. But yeah, Russell, just want to thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on today. And yeah, this looks very promising. Basically, like a Web3 Vercel
Yeah, exactly.
is the vibe I got. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, so
Um,
that's what the niche we're trying to fill. Like a Web3 focused version of Vercel makes it extremely easy to deploy performance sites. And I do see one last question, which is for Next.js, etc. sites. How are API keys handled? So we don't have support for that yet. So that's what will come when we're able to add the serverless function side. Is then you'd be able to do something where you need to store an API key. Right now, we only have support for static sites. So if you're using Next.js, if you're using the API folder, then you can't use this for that yet today. But if you're not using the API folder, then you can use it. We do a static export for Next.js. So even though it uses server-side rendering, you're able to export your Next.js site as a static site, and we do have support for that. But if you're interested in being able to use the serverless functions and the API key, then just follow us on Twitter and we'll let you know, and send me a DM and I'll let you know when we have support for that in our platform.
Boom. Love it. And just before everybody leaves today, I want to share the QR code for you to fill out a form to be able to get your hands on the DevNTell NFT for being an attendee today. So slight difference, very slight difference in terms of how we're going to be doing these going forward. So as I mentioned last time, we're going to be utilizing the form. So you're going to have to fill out this form, which will be open for 1 hour. And the idea is you fill out this form, and at the end of the month, you'll be dropped an NFT and potentially code rewards as well for being a viewer today. So what you want to do is scan this QR code, fill out the form, and you should expect a NFT drop at the end of the month. So if you've scanned multiple of these throughout the weeks and weeks throughout DevNTell, you will receive multiple NFTs. So the more the better. And like I mentioned, 1 hour. These are capped at 1 hour, so you'll definitely want to fill these out as quick as possible. And like I mentioned earlier, Russell, I'll send you a different form for being a speaker today. But just want to wish everybody a very happy Friday, happy weekend, and that we will see you all here back next week. All right, gang. All the best.
Appreciate it,
Cheers.
everyone. See you. See ya.
See ya.